Hey everybody, I am back with my thoughts on the final episode of Skeleton Crew and my thoughts on the series as a whole. Um, it was fine. It was fine. Like, it's definitely not the strongest episode of the series. I will give you that. It begins where the prior episode left off, and Jod and Fern, because Fern's trying to clue her mom in. Jod takes Fern and her mom to the supervisor while sending the other kids home with their parents with a droid escort, and telling the droids to watch. um and it's when we get to the supervisor, I find out the supervisor is a droid. And here's where I get my first issue is the supervisor, once Jod says that he's both a emissary and a Jedi, immediately invokes that the last communication that they got from the Republic was that the Jedi were traitors to Order 66. Here's the issue. Jod is freely wielding a lightsaber around these security droids. At that point, if the supervisor is programmed that the Jedi are traitors and somebody shows up wielding a Jedi weapon and is proclaiming they're a Jedi in front of these security droids, the security droid should have already stunned his ass. At that point. Because clearly, I mean, through the show, Jod doesn't have, the Jedi sense to be able to kind of predict things a little bit before they happen. That reaction, that immediate kind of, you know, ability to kind of react to things shortly before they happen. We see that over and over again because Jod keeps stepping in it himself throughout the show. So that started rubbing me kind of the wrong way, because it was like, well, why wouldn't the security droids already be like, oh, hey, wait a minute. That's a lightsaber. This is a Jedi. These guys are traitors to the Republic. And, it shouldn't have even got to the point where he could have stabbed the supervisor and taken the power out. So that didn't make sense. And then it just kind of builds from there. It starts the usual pattern of these Star Wars shows where it gets to the ending and everything is rushed. So, and part of that is because you're trying to cram all of this stuff into basically like a 30-minute package, which, I mean, can work sometimes, but the problem is that they still go back into slow things down, because the other thing that's going on is, it cuts over to Wim and his dad is back in drilling him on this stupid assessment test again. Your kid has been gone for weeks at this point, from what we can tell, because, passage of time is always difficult to tell in Star Wars, but from what we can tell, it seems like they've been gone for weeks. And your kid ain't been home even a day yet, and you're already grilling him on the assessment test. That's bad storytelling. That just is. And when we get to the ending, I'll go into a little more as to why. Because, when Jod stabs the supervisor, all the power goes out. The droids go down. Everything's down. So the kids go off to rescue Fern. KB goes off to the ship to go up and summon the New Republic. But in order to do that, they, because the landing clamps are on, Wim and his dad go to the supervisor tower to go turn the power back on. Neil goes to find the, cannon. And, it's just kind of rush till we get to the point. They destroy the barrier. And then, the X-Wings come down. mop everything up super quick, and it then just kind of very abruptly ends because you get to the end, they say that KB's okay because the ship had crashed. They go get her, KB's fine. We get a little like them trying to ape the binary sunset. Wim looking up, seeing the ships. Ships are coming in for a landing, and then it ends. So now jumping back. Now, if they'd gone for a more satisfying ending, because what resolution do we get to the pirates? Not really anything. They destroyed their main ship, but we never see them getting, walked onto a Republic cruiser in handcuffs. Jod is just sitting, chilling in the supervisor tower. Like, we don't see him get scooped up. But what's more important here to the ending of this, to give it a really true satisfying ending, is you could have had an ending where you have Fern's mom talking to a real Republic emissary and talking about how they're going to bring Manhattan into the Republic proper, and they're going to set everything up. But you could have had a moment where, especially since you did decide that you were going to go and do this whole shot in this scene with going back to them having this argument over this stupid assessment test out of nowhere, when all that Wim's dad should be doing in that moment is just being happy his kid's alive. But since you decided to do that callback, you could have had an ending where Wim is talking to one of the Republic pilots, one of the X-Wing pilots, and the X-Wing pilot saying, "Yeah, kid, when you're old enough, now that we've got you into the Republic proper, when you're old enough, you can come to Academy, kid, and you can be one of the good guys. You can be one of the heroes. You can get in an X-Wing and fly around. Like, hey, like, you could have had that nice little satisfying beat at the end and then ended. And then you'd have a much more, like, that's a good, happy ending. Instead, it just kind of ends. And that's been a problem with a lot of the Star Wars shows, is that they spent all this time building to the end, getting to the end, and then because they have to tie up all these different loose ends, because of the way they're writing characters and the way that they're jumping characters back and forth, because they do that with Jod. Like, okay, he's this pirate, he's on the outs with this pirate crew, so he takes up with these kids so he can get out, and then there's all these moments where he's protecting them and caring for them, and then all of a sudden he turns on them. But then he's back to caring about them and rescuing them and all this kind of stuff, and then he turns on them. And then, he's perfectly willing to dump his, pirate crew in acid. But then he's perfectly willing to enrich them all by the end of it and be this mustache-twirling villain by the end of it. But even that they can't do consistently, because when KB crashes, he's like, "Oh, I didn't want this to happen." Be at least consistent. But they can't even do that right. So by the time you get to the end, you have these just horribly unsatisfying endings that just kind of tank the show in a bit. Now this one isn't as bad as, like, say, Acolyte, where they put in so many loose threads that don't get tied up that you're just like, well, what are we even doing here? You've left me with more questions than answers, and you're not getting a second season. At least this one didn't do that as much, where it's ending on a cliffhanger that you're not going to get a second season. But it still could have been a much more satisfying ending. So the show as a whole, it's fine. I feel like it's more concerned with being Goonies in a Star Wars skin suit than it is with being really good, strong Star Wars. And that's where it kind of tanks a bit for me. But overall, I'd say it's a solid 3.5 out of 5. It's enjoyable, but like with most of the Star Wars stuff from Disney, especially the shows, there's nothing there that's connecting me to it enough, that's impacting enough in the same way that the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy is, that really has me going, oh, I want to go back to that. I could rewatch that. Like, there's nothing really there. I mean, I'm more inclined to go back and rewatch old Star Trek episodes at this point than any of the Star Wars shows, and that's kind of sad to me. So those are my thoughts on Skeleton Crew. It's fine. It's one of the better Star Wars shows from Disney, but it's still, in comparison to what we had during, the George Lucas era, it's still just not quite hitting. So in my next video, I'm going to kind of spend some time formulating my thoughts as to why I think Disney Star Wars is really just continuing to miss the mark, and why it's a struggle sometimes for me to finish watching these Disney Star Wars shows. So that'll be coming hopefully fairly soon, within the next few days. So, as usual, if you like this content, make sure to like it, share it, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next episode.